Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday meditation gathering. I'm so glad you're all here to share this time together. Meditation gathers energy when we meditate together. This week, we have Ken Gorman, who will lead us in meditation, and then we'll have 20 minutes of silence. After that, we'll open it up for sharing, and we end at 10:45. Over to you, Ken.
Thank you, Dan. I thought I'd just start off with a reading from Song of Prayer to lead us in. It starts with the word prayer, but as we've been talking about, we've been doing a lot of Song of Prayer workshops and things. Prayer and meditation sort of end up being sort of interchangeable. And so maybe we can look at it that way. So this says prayer, or sort of a meditative version of that. Prayer is the way to true humility. And here again, it rises slowly and grows in strength and love and holiness. Let it believe the ground where it begins to rise to God, and true humility will come at last to grace the mind that thought it was alone and stood against the world. Humility brings peace because it does not claim you must rule the universe, nor judge all things as you would have them be. All little gods it gladly lays aside, not in resentment, but in honesty and recognition that they do not serve. Illusions and humility have goals so far apart they cannot coexist, nor share a dwelling place where they can meet. Where one has come, the other disappears. The truly humble have no goal but God, because they need no idols, and defense no longer serves a purpose. Enemies are useless now, because humility does not oppose, it does not hide in shame. It is content with what it is, knowing creation is the will of God. Its selflessness is self, and this it sees in every meeting where it gladly joins with every son of God, whose purity recognizes that it shares with him. I'm done.
Open your eyes slowly and come back into the room. We have 20 minutes left for sharing your reflections and your questions. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand, or you can use the reactions button at the bottom of the screen, and I'll invite you to take yourself off of mute. If you'd like to ask Ken a question or a comment with confidentiality, put your message in the chat function at the bottom of the screen, and I'll read it out. Who would like to share? Lottie, take yourself off of mute.
I'm sorry, I'm using my phone for the first time and it's not so easy to find the buttons. I came out of listening to Ken, feeling a little bit deprived because I hadn't been able to pick up all the words. It was a little bit too quick for me. And I sat there for a little while and then thought, I must ask Spirit about this. And when I asked, the words I was given were, my goal is God. And then it transmuted into, my only goal is God. And that was a very fruitful meditation, for which I thank you. And then another thing came in about deprivation. And my first thought was, how can I possibly be deprived if my only goal is God? And I realized that getting to my only goal is God came out of a feeling of deprivation, which I hadn't fully recognized. So there was a real beauty and completeness in the meditation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an amazing story or recounting. I think, the course has lots of meditations, and we all experience the course differently, but it's all about creating a space for Holy Spirit to be an authority. And sometimes we talk about our heart and our connection with God and our awareness and stuff. These are just different words for the same thing, but it's, and the ego constantly wants to be satisfied with reading the text and digesting it and analyzing and making judgments based on it. Often the judgments are against ourselves for not getting it. And suddenly you go into meditation, and the thinking mind, the whole point of the meditation is to let the thinking mind be. And we're having an experience of ourself that isn't the thinking mind. And that for me, the explanation that was given is I have two centers of consciousness. One is the head and one is the heart. And the heart is vast, and I can have experiences in both. And in meditation, I'm resting in that heart experience. And the heart, of course, doesn't need the words. It doesn't need the structures. It's already there. It's where Holy Spirit resides. And we learn to kind of see the head as, in Way of Mastery, he calls it a dumb servant, whereas we've been seeing the head as the main event, the ego and all that. It doesn't have to go away. We don't have to fight it or anything. It just sort of, just like you just described, it just sort of disappears as we connect with the heart, because the heart is so vast and powerful. It ends up being kind of small, and we don't have to worry about it too much anymore. And it's that transition. And I think that's why meditation is so important, because it gives us the time to have that awareness. And that's why in meditation, if your head is still thinking, it doesn't matter. It's just going round and round and round, because that's not where you're turning your attention, your awareness towards something else. And that something else is so big, it can actually contain the thinking of the head. Is just sort of like a television set, going in the other room or something like that. And it's not a problem. We don't need to do anything with it, because our true nature is so vast. But thank you for that. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Norman, take yourself off mute.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Ken. It's strange how these meetings coincide exactly with my state of mind. You mentioned prayer, and just this morning, well, last night actually, I was dog tired. I couldn't understand it. 9 o'clock, and I just couldn't stay awake, and I was annoyed with myself, so I went to bed. And when I woke up this morning, I was still very annoyed with myself. And I thought, this is very unfair. This is all one-way traffic. And I just, an open heart and an open mind. And I said, you said at the end of your statement, I'm done. And that's what reminded me what I said this morning. I'm done, quite literally. And I just sat there feeling very sorry for myself. And the Holy Spirit just said, get your book out, go and sit down and open the Course in Miracles. So I did, and it opened up on forgiveness, as forgiveness being the key to everything. And I sat down with my book, and it started off, I couldn't figure out where the ego came from initially. It was when I was a child at 3 years old. I had a big stick in my hand, and a man was walking along the road, and the ego told me to hit him with it before he hit me. And I did. And he looked at me. But I was expecting to get hit back, but of course it's he'd already going to hit the 3-year-old child, but off he went. But that's when my ego started, and it took control over me until it was now I'm 76. I nearly got rid of it 20 years ago, but that's another story. But prayer for me is that open mind and total honesty. And God is, I got reminded that God has always been with me, even when ego began. In all my ego life, God's never went away. He's always been there. But he respects me for what I am. And I was almost like a twin. I had a life which I can't remember, really, which other people could see in me. But at least it's all come out now. And I'm starting to shake a wee bit. But, you know, an immense gratitude to God, you know, just for being what he is. And for the Holy Spirit to help us all, and for openness and honesty as a prayer in itself. Thank you for going on, and let me go on. Thank you.
Thanks, Norman. Yeah, I think it's interesting. The way because this is all about experiences, right? The experience of God is an experience, like experiencing a sunset. We can talk about it, but the actual experiences is the real deal. And the Course is getting at that our true nature is the heart. It is the peace. It is the vastness. And we may only get glimpses of it in meditation. It's not the head. It's not the thinking. It's not even it's not the states of mind. Those are just ego going from one thing to the other. You know, it's flitting from happy, sad. But for a long time, we think that that's who we are. And the Course, through a lot of different kinds of most of the lessons are meditations in some form. They're getting us to go back into the heart and to really put Holy Spirit in authority. And because Holy Spirit's going to tell us something different than the ego, right? And so, but to know that that's there the whole time. It's very similar. You guys ever been on a runway in a plane and it's stormy? You know, sometimes you're on the runway and the plane's going back and forth because it's windy, and then the plane takes off and it's really bumpy. And then it gets above the clouds and it's just totally smooth and the sun's shining. Well, the reality is the sun and the smoothness was there the whole time. You know, the bumpiness was simply a temporary small layer of air. You know, but the reality is the sun and the smoothness that's, you know, these are analogies, of course, but that's what's down there the whole time, you know. So there is really no evolution in this path. It's a more of a de-evolution. For the introduction to the courses, this is not a course in teaching the meaning of love, because that's beyond what can be taught. It's about the blocks being removed to the awareness of love's presence. So this is a letting go. And in meditation, we start to refocus and turn our awareness towards the heart and towards the sense of vastness and love and all that. And the Course keeps telling us over and over again, that's the only thing that's really real anyway. All this thing you've been living in the head is not reflecting anything. It's not also not sin. You know, you're not guilty for it, because that's the game the ego plays, right? Is you have to experience whatever it is, and then you have to feel guilty for having that experience. And then if you're really, really educated spiritual practitioner, you have to feel guilty that you felt guilty and you're not doing your practices, so you don't have, and round and round spiritual ego goes. And then we just sit in meditation and go, wait a minute, that whole mechanism called the mind, I call it the television in the other room, I can just ignore it and just sit and sit in my heart. And they're telling me. I had a Buddhist teacher that said the sense you have of awareness is as close as you get to enlightenment in this lifetime. It's, you're literally experiencing that when you get that sense of just being aware is the enlightenment itself. It's we get distracted by this head that we can learn to ignore. But that's a whole lifetime process. It seems to be anyway, certainly for me. But anyway.
Thank you.
I have a comment in the chat. It says, beautiful. Thank you for the song of prayer and your explanation now too. And thanks all. Catherine?
It may be an example of not going into a quiet mind, but the image that came to me was just the beauty that is imbued, that A Course in Miracles imbues in the word humility, that it's sort of synonymous with safety. And where my mind went was to the story of the Garden of Eden and this idea that all we would have to do to be chucked out, it's so perilous, our relationship with God. All we'd have to do is just disobey one instruction and eat an apple, you know. And humility is knowing we cannot be chucked out and our identity cannot be lost. And yeah, I just find that I just really sort of rested in that safety of that humility of knowing I am not more powerful than God, and God is love, and therefore everything, all is well, all is well. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, humility is the Course uses very interesting words, especially in the Song of Prayer section. Song of Prayer is a very interesting text because it's really, it's not heady. It's about getting us into an experience of something. And so it has to get at it around the edges. You know, you're trying to describe the elephant, and so it uses these words. By the way, we did a whole webinar on Song of Prayer that's on Miracle Network's website. If anybody wants to see it, that the Holy Spirit manifested in it. I thought it helped me a lot anyway. But humility for me in this context, and again, everybody's in different, you know, experiences these things differently, and they're all correct because Holy Spirit's using the blue book for all of us individually, right? It's an individual course. It says so in the first sentence. So it's just accepting what is. I have the humility to accept God as God and as the authority. I have the humility to accept my true nature as it is. And that sounds really odd till I realize my ego has been doing just the opposite and telling me, you know, that it isn't all like this, and my brother is sinful, and I'm sinful, and then on and on and on, all the stories. And to learn, I don't have to listen to that part of the mind. I don't have to do anything to that part of the mind. The Holy Spirit takes care of that, and it can be ignored. But the humility is by saying, you know, look, I am what I am, and I can embrace that and stop trying to be something different, somehow, something like that. And from the ego tells me that when I do that, I'll be destroyed and I won't have any more personal power, when in fact, the idea of the Course is, no, actually you'll be fulfilled because you've now accepted yourself, you know, as something, and that's something you are can then take its own natural course as we were created, something like that. But anyway.
Who'd like to share? Sue, take yourself off mute.
Hi, thank you, Ken. I started off very similar to Lottie. I felt I've got no direction. What can I do? This is, what am I supposed to think about? And it threw me a bit. And I similarly asked, what am I supposed to do? And then I remembered the word humility. And I had a really wonderful experience. It came to me that humility is accepting myself as God says I am. And I realize how much I've rejected that.
Right.
And how much I want to know, no, it's okay to say this person is as God says, and it's okay to say that person, but it's not okay to say me, because I'm this bad person that hates people and so on. And I was able to let go of all that. And I just reached this connection with peace. And it was because I can accept, when you think about saying, God, you think I'm like this, but actually I know better. That is so ridiculous. And it was like the foolishness of that concept allowed me to just put aside and just accept it. And it was just really, it's like there's no strain anymore, because I can be what God says I am. And I'm a bit blown away by that right now. But I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to experience that.
Thanks, Sue. That's great. I mean, that's it. And it's the only thing for the way I experience it now, and maybe it just helps me, that it's not me that's doing that. Because what is me? What is I? It's the ego. I think of the ego as a computer program. I was born with it, and having an experience in this lifetime. I don't know why. That's part of humility, is to not ask questions that can't be answered that easily. They don't really help. But I have it, and I have to work with it. And the course gives me a way of working with the ego through a set of practices and this solution. The solution to every problem in the Course in Miracles is always the Holy Spirit, right? It's always returning authority to the Holy Spirit, and that we practice. The other part of humility is to say, okay, now I got this, and it is doing exactly what you said, because it wants independence from God. It's a computer program that is programmed to be independent from God, and what we're returning to is our dependence on God. Our very emanation is from God. The second part of humility is to say, okay, I've got this thing and I'm caught up in it, but I can't undo this myself. I can't just understand conceptually what's happening. At a practical level, I also need God, i.e. the Holy Spirit, to carry me through the process of not being caught up in this thing. And that's our practice. Funny enough, if anybody's ever studied a 12-step program, this is exactly the same as the 12 steps. Step one is the admission that my life is running out of control because, say, the alcoholic mind, which is a subset of ego in my mind, is running me, and it's been calling the shots and all that. Step two is recognizing God, and step three is turning the journey over to God. So the one trick the spiritual ego plays is, once we've recognized this, it's been pointed out in endless ways in the course, is thinking that we are now in charge of our spiritual program. And that doesn't work. And anybody in a 12-step program can tell you they did that for years, trying to fix their addiction problem. And it was only when they realized they couldn't, and only a higher power could. So it's that two-step humility of recognizing I'm doing that, and also recognizing the solution lies in a power greater than me, that my ego's experience is greater than me, however you relate to that. And we, the course is it's always the solution is the Holy Spirit. is we're turning our, and I believe then people say, well, how do I do that? And the answer is daily practice. It's, it's morning prayers, meditations, whatever you're guided to do, reading the course, all of it works, because every time we're doing a prayer, a meditation, whatever, we're implicitly surrendering to God, aren't we? Because we're acknowledging him, we're acknowledging his authority, and all those accumulate somehow, something. That's my experience anyway. But anyway, I'm done.
Thank you.
I'd like to share. Celia, take yourself off mute.
Thank you, Ken. Everything you have said this morning has hit home for me. The meditation it was wonderful. I can go to that place where there isn't anything that I need to do or be, or I am not there really. It's just a place of rest and knowing that I don't need to know. But your words of describing for other people have just so very helpful. And I know that, I mean, I love the course. I've been doing it for a long time. But I'm getting to that place now where the Holy Spirit's authority is stronger than anything else. And that is just such a marvelous place to be. The ego still is there. And I know it's because I haven't let it go, and that I'm still on one level needing to distract myself, and I'm not forgiving myself sufficiently to just let it, for it not to be important anymore. But thank you. I just feel so nourished by the meditation itself, your descriptions, and other people's questions. It's been a wonderful morning. So thank you. That's me.
Thank you for that. And I loved what you said. The Holy Spirit is now starting to take a more dominant authority. And I think that's one of the, it's really hard to know when our practice is making progress. In fact, maybe impossible, because who would know? It would be the ego. And the ego really isn't a fan of this process, if you know what I mean, because it's losing control. And so all you can kind of know is that you did your practice. But that is it. I think as we start to get a sense, but it's all happening in the heart level, you see, because the head doesn't get fixed. The Course in Miracles is not an ego fixing program. So those blocks it talks about in the introduction, those blocks being removed to the awareness of love's presence that's always there, are really happening in the heart, and at a level so deep that we can't see it at an intellectual level. And it seems to happen as a process over time as we do our practices. So that it's almost like I visualize an energy. It is coming in and wiping, almost like mud on a windshield. And imagine my heart as the windshield. And it's slowly but surely wiping the mud, and slowly but surely I get this sense. And it isn't not an intellectual experience. And then you say, what is that energy? Well, that energy is the constantly connecting back. And I also believe, there was a time when the Course didn't exist in written form anyway. And it was, this is my thing, okay, but there was an energy vortex, if you want to call it that then through Helen manifested itself in words, right? But the words are simply an expression of that energy vortex. And in Buddhism, we call this the Dharma. The Dharma is the awakening energy that's coming through like radio signals, that's coming through always to help us if we want to tune into them. And so to me, when I open the Course, it doesn't matter where I open it anymore. It's as if I'm opening the course and it creates an instant, like internet-like connection to that energy vortex, because it's so powerful. And so I'm not sure the words I read anymore that often don't matter, because I'm not doing this as much intellectually as I'm 30 years now, and I used to be very heady with it. But reading it still matters. I read it every day, you know. But what I read doesn't seem to matter. It's the fact that I opened it and acknowledged and connected with the cleansing energy that comes through, and you know, and did what it said with it, which is the practices and stuff. And even in the forgiveness sections in Song of Prayer, you know, it has this whole forgiveness to destroy thing about how we've gotten forgiveness wrong. But then there's a forgiveness for salvation. That really the only instruction is let Holy Spirit show you what forgiveness is. You know, that's the answer to everything. But again, that takes time, and it takes this cleansing process to be happening. But I just think it's through regular practice and just even opening the course, and wherever we are doesn't matter. And the head will never know where we are. If your head ever tells you you're this or you're that or you're whatever, sorry, last point, I know we're running out of time. In the happy dream section, it says sometimes what you judge as your greatest victories are actually setbacks, and what you judge as your greatest defeats are actually your greatest advances forward, making a very clear statement that we will never know. The ego will never know where we are. The only thing we know is that we kept going, you know, doing all the things so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for sharing all your wonderful insights. And take yourself off of mute and show your appreciation to Ken.
Thank you so much.
It was wonderful.
Thank you
Ken.
very much.
Ken.
Everybody.
Lots of love. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, wonderful.
100%.
Love to you all.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Love to everyone.
Bye-bye.